screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The paupers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
It is and has been very good. How about you?
Week? Yeah, it's been a good week. It's yeah, there was some good movement.
I've been worried for Max Igan. I mean, we're not like close friends, but he seems to be going through whatever he's going through, and yeah, I don't know.
Going through?
Huh?
What's he going through? Something physical and something?
Well, he posted a video that was very unlike him that talked about a glowing light that came into his room and seemed to like have some effect on his mental state, and then how he felt like he was sort of given all of this information and this message to bring forth, and that he was sort of like the chosen one. He didn't actually call himself the chosen one. He said that he was chosen to bring this information through at this time, which is at least a little safer. And then he said, you know, he made a lot of claims, which he doesn't usually make claims, and I guess he's never really been a flat earther, which I hate that term, but, you know, he's never really said, but he said, like, the earth is flat, and this is a constructed reality, and the weather is manipulated, and blah, 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 and all of these sort of claims, which in itself is weird for him. And then he went about saying that, like, you know, there's the reset is going to come, and the great reset, like, always happens, and, like, a few people will make it through, and that each of us has to sort of, like, try to carry this information through to the next level or whatever. And it was just kind of very uncharacteristic, and yeah, and it could be like, I was just, even at the time I was like, well, it's kind of dangerous to like feel like you're very special when you have these sorts of spiritual experiences, but also it's like hard not to in the moment. But like, he didn't actually, you know, say that, but then he did make all those claims, and then right before that, there had been this sort of like hoopla about like, oh, Max Igan's been arrested, and like that went around like the whole, you know, noospheres, like Max Igan's been arrested, and then this video came out. So I was kind of like, did he get, you know, the tap on the shoulder, and then this is what they've asked him to start doing, is spewing this sort of, you know.
What's the lag between him being arrested, the stories of him being arrested, and then that video? It
was something like 12 hours, or like it wasn't that long.
Oh, so it was quick. Like the same day.
Yeah, it was very quickly after. And then I want to say like the next day, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with details, but shortly after that, there was another video that was like, you know, I wasn't, you know, I didn't have this like spiritual awakening, and those claims aren't true, and I was just trying to get your attention, and this is the sort of like thing we have to watch out for, or whatever. And then I was like, well, that's also very unlike him to like play a big, huge trick on everyone. So it's just been very confusing. And then after that, somewhere, and I don't know where, but people are posting screenshots of, maybe it's Twitter, or I'm not sure like where these comments are being made, but he's supposedly saying, you know, that he feels like what actually happened was that he was sort of attacked in this like EMF sort of, you know, like Wi-Fi or whatever. They're able to like beam stuff into your head, which they are able to allegedly, like, right? We can see these patents on various sites and from the CIA and wherever, and, you know, so like he says like that's what happened, and that he's not even sure exactly what's going on, and he's going to take a few weeks to sort it out. And I'm just like, I can imagine having this light come into your room and having this sort of thing, and like feeling like you need to tell everyone, and then realizing like you're not sure what happened, and then needing like time to figure that out. And so who knows what's happening, but I guess I'm just kind of worried, and people are just attacking him a lot, and it's like, it's good to stay like vigilant against possible fuckery and to ask questions and whatever, but I don't think like he needs to be attacked for it. Like, whatever's happening, he's going through something, you know, and he probably needs like some love and support, and not attacking. But yeah, it's hard to parse and figure out what suddenly happened.
Is this, and this was all in the past week?
Yeah, this is all in the past handful of days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm like, weird. This is very weird.
I mean, you brought up, you brought up a whole bunch of like, topics that I find very interesting on a personal level.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
I mean, particularly, I mean, I think about this a lot because, maybe not to that extreme as Max, but like, I often wonder, like, I've got, I've got enough of a background where if I were to see my background on someone else, I would be suspect. I'd be like,
Yeah.
but I don't have any memories. Um, part of my background, and I'll be like, um, I'm being very transparent with you right now. Is like on
Yeah.
my mother's side of the family, there's a lot of her brother and her mother were both institutionalized
Oh, wow.
throughout their lives.
Yeah.
So like there's a nuts factor in my family.
Yeah.
I don't know what nuts means, but I know that there's like, there's mental instability, and I don't think I'm mentally unstable,
Right.
but I'm like,
You're always kind of wary.
if one is being honest with themselves, you have to at times. I mean, that there's a paradox of self-awareness and understanding like psyche stuff, because you're going to naturally reflect it. If you're not being honest with yourself, you have to go through a period where you reflect your own internal world and both what you experience and then what you know. So all that being said, the two hospital, or the hospital which my my uncle and my grandmother went to, they both have a MK Ultra history.
Wow.
That doesn't mean
Yeah,
anything.
right.
Other than the fact that, okay, I know how the game the game plays, or at least I know what the research has told me. And I also, and the other thing which is interesting is, and this goes with my my background, my mother, she worked for one of the scientists at Edgewood Arsenal that was doing the Army's version of the MK Ultra experiments in the 50s and
Wow.
60s. And my mother has worked, and my father also has worked with companies that, a lot of companies, they touch these sort of things.
Right.
And so when I look at, both my own experience, I mean, and it gets even friggin' weirder. I mean, who my ex-wife's father-in-law was. But when I go and I look at my own experience, like the actual things which I've done and I've been through, and then I look at my internal experience. I mean, kind of like what I was talking about last week. Like, I'm like, am I friggin' nuts? Am I being tampered with? Because tampering can happen in such a way, like it's made to think you're nuts.
Yes.
And then like the icing, or am I just imagining all this sort of stuff? Like, I see all these details, and I like putting myself in a story which I've read. And then to make matters even friggin' worse, or more complex, is last year I went through like a real messy breakup.
Yeah.
And the woman who I was in a relationship, amongst other things, was a practicing witch.
Yeah.
And what I live in like what you would call a magical world, but I'm not like I don't do spells. I don't do spells. Like that's not my thing. That doesn't speak to me, but it did to her. Like, she did that sort of shit. And in May, like, there was like a pop. We broke up the previous November, so a year and 2 months ago. And then in the previous May, like, things got ugly again. And she was sending me all these pictures of this Romanian witch who she's been working with, and telling me about all the spells they're doing on me to lead to my demise.
What the hell?
And it's like, you can't get that out of your psyche, when like, what's going on? And then also like, I pick things up, like I know that, and like, am I picking up other stuff? Is this my stuff? Is it, and so it's like, when you tell me this when I hear this Max story, like on one hand, it's like kind of reassuring.
Yeah. You're like, it's not just us.
Well, exactly, and I'm not experiencing something of that extreme,
Yeah.
but um, uh, it really makes me, pause, and at the same time, like what he's saying, like I'm like that kind of feels right too. Like there's
Yeah.
something going on, and so
Well, and the
it,
timing of like the possible arrest story within all of this is like there seems to be like, or it seems like it could be some outside, very physical, very real organization sort of targeting him because he's very effective, especially with these fires in Australia that have been going on lately, and getting the sort of word out about like how unreal that is and how pretty clearly planned and intentional those all were. And so, and then calling for action about that, which I think is something that they really don't like when you're effective in getting to people and getting the message out, but they really don't like it, especially if you're then like asking people to do something about it. I think, that's my like understanding. And
right.
so that makes sense too. And I definitely am with you with the, you know, very strange things can happen in life that are kind of beyond like science and physics's explanation, and we know that that sort of exists, and that you can experience those types of things, and that it's not insane. And I even think about like, the difference between a shaman and a schizophrenic is just hospitalization and culture. Like there's no, otherwise it's like a lot. There's cultures and there historically that have taken these sorts of things as skills and abilities rather than illness and something to sort of solve and push away. And so there's that aspect of it as well, that like we think we look at like insanity in our psyche as sort of this messy playground that we need to control instead of exploring and embracing almost.
Right.
And I don't tell people a lot of my own stories because I don't want, especially the kind of casual observer, to be like, oh, she's insane, literally, like she's schizophrenic or psychotic or whatever. And so I think that's something that Max, in doing that, he's like very vulnerable for sharing this experience, and especially if it's real, because there are so many people that now can just so easily dismiss him. But then I think like that is exactly why an outside force like, governmental or whatever, might want him to say exactly those things, because now anything he says is questionable and dismissible.
Without a doubt, and it's also like putting that out there. There is, you can have a legal precedent for locking him up against his will.
Good point.
I mean,
That's
there's
terrifying.
so I go back to, and I like having this conversation with you because I can't have this conversation with everyone.
Yeah.
We're going, we have these moving goalposts, or maybe these moving like things which we're reflecting upon. Or is this like, spiritual? Is this governmental? Is this like, insanity? Is
Yeah.
all these sort of things? And they're, so we jump back and forth to what we like, what's fucking real.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things I can't help but keep going back to is, that quote from, I think it's William Casey. William Casey was the CIA director for Reagan, and the quote was, "We know that our job, being the CIA's job, is complete when no one knows what's true and what's false.
Everything that everyone believes is a lie." Yeah.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what everyone believes is a lie. Which I changed that. That's what he said. But the meaning of it is no one knows what's true.
Right.
No one knows what's true.
Right.
And like the irony of that whole thing is that you don't even know if that quote's true.
Right.
That's the whole sort of thing. But like the best I've ever gotten is there's a woman who is claimed to have been the person who's heard it. And she was a regular on, was it Maid Russell? Was that her name?
That sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't know why. I can't place it.
Like cutting edge conspiracy host, like 1980s, 1990s, like way before Head of the Curve, I think.
Oh, wow.
He Who Remembers might be the name of the show. So she was like a big, maybe even a little bit earlier than when William Cooper was alive.
Okay.
That sort of genre of conspiracy researcher. But so the quote goes back there. So that's one part of it. But have you ever seen, and I'm certain you have, it's an interview with a former KGB agent. And it's filmed, I want to say, like in 1982, 1983, and he's got like this yellow plaid sports coat on. And he's talking all about what the Russians were capable of doing with the EMF technology.
Yeah.
And
I am starting to remember. I have seen that.
I'm certain, like,
Yeah.
we've all seen the same stuff. We've all seen the same stuff. And to me, it's one of the most interesting. It's fascinating because, and I'm pretty certain Max himself talks about it a lot too.
Yeah.
It's a nice touch point which we can all go to. Like, this guy said that at this time, and we can go and verify with then patents, and we can verify what we can see with technology now in contemporary times, and it seems to make like a whole lot of sense. So that quote came out like the same time the William Casey quote came out.
Okay.
And so at that particular time in our history, the KGB and the CIA were like, ultimate foes. It was before the fall of the Berlin Wall. So these are, supposedly two guys from the same side or from the opposite side. And they both kind of have the same message at the same time, because he's basically saying, like, you can't trust your thoughts.
You can't trust your senses. Yeah.
And then the CIA guy saying that, oh, we're gonna give everyone lies. And it's happening at the same time. And so the only reason we believe this guy's ex-KGB is because it says on like the screen that he's ex-KGB.
Yeah.
So like, oh, this is the KGB, and I'm telling you I'm the ex-KGB, and I'm just telling you this.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you this. Time the CIA, it's like the riddle of, it's like the man who says nothing I say is ever true.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that. And these two are supposed so okay, so what I think is so interesting about that is I've never heard anyone put those two storylines side by side with each other and then compare and contrast in what I'm suggesting, which is like, I think there's a potential those are linked, but at the same time they're the truth.
Right.
And what is like, you don't know what is true and what is not.
This is what I was just talking about too with the Mandela effect, which I'm like, it's very possible that most of that is just electronic manipulation, because all of our evidence is coming from online. It's all video and it's all online. And so all of that can be manipulated and has been able to be manipulated for years. And so like it's possible they're just inserting this in to be like, how can we fuck with you and make you not trust yourself?
And that goes back to where I started with all this, which is like, we don't even know what we're comparing things to. Are we comparing it to like the government conspiracy? Are we comparing it to the spiritual conspiracy? All of like there's no stability. Like we're looking for some stability to like have our point of reference for what the hell is going on. Yeah. But at the same time, this is this is what the KGB guy says. He says, this is how you break the moral backbone of a nation. And the KGB were experts of it, and there are 4 steps, and it takes 20 years. And we started this 20 years ago, so it's already done. And he's saying this in 1982, which is a mind fuck. But also looking at, and I forget what those 4 points are, and it might be interesting for you to go back and look at this video, because it's still one of those things you can find.
Right.
This is where we are right now. It's like, we don't know what is real. We like on our individual self. Yeah. I know I have that struggle. Like, I'm going through all this stuff and like, I can't put my head there.
Yeah.
And what I noticed, what it does is it makes me feel, and I was saying this to you last week, it makes me feel paralyzed. I'm like, I just don't want to do anything.
Yeah. Which is like the goal, right? Like,
is that not the goal?
Right. You're paralyzed and you can't even trust yourself or believe in yourself enough to like manage a sort of like intentional and solid thought and intention. Then what can you ever do? How could you ever escape whatever this trap might be, or if there is a trap? There was this really interesting synchro too. So I guess I didn't notice this at the time, but in one of Max's videos that I was just describing, he had read a passage from Castaneda, whichever one, I don't know. Yeah. And so, and then somebody in the group, in Eyes Open, had posted, Lori had posted that same passage, but she didn't even know that Max had read that recently. So she posted this passage and she's like, isn't this interesting? It's talking about sort of these controllers, or these, you can like archons, or I think he calls them the flyers or whatever, and that they're kind of like basically always feeding off of your and he kind of describes it as like your homogeneity or whatever, your ability to like fit into this like mainstream narrative and just sort of go along with it, or whatever. And so the people who are seeing through that and have enough sort of presence of mind and force of will, or like, you know, power of intention to like sort of like carry themselves through that unscathed, are the ones who are like giving these less food at least, or like sort of like making their way towards the place where they can detach from them completely or whatever. And so that was really interesting that she posted that, didn't know that Max had just posted it. And then like this sort of, it's paralleling what we're talking about here, where there's like perhaps a place where you can be stable inside yourself, you know, and find that stability that's lacking in the external world, and enough to have your own presence of mind and like intention to still be powerful enough to use that in the world, or carry yourself through it at least, or something.
I mean, it's thoughts like that, which is what kind of pushes, like I find, for inspiration to push through. Because, like, and you could look at this in, I mean, the idea. So two things. One is, I think what we're describing is a predictable place that any person who's becoming awake to how life works will eventually find themselves. And I consider myself rather advanced. I consider yourself rather advanced. You know, we've been studying this for a long time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, my sense is this is kind of like a deeper level. You know, this isn't like, you know, the initial sort of things. I can remember like around 2011, like really interested in like storing food and shit like that. I don't give a shit about anything like that. Like, I mean, if it gets like that, like either I'm going to figure it out, but having like 10 tons of food in the basement, like all that does. So I went through that. Now I'm doing something else. And so that does seem to be tied into like, again, like these kind of hero's journey, shamanic breakdown, cracking, all of these sort of things, like the alchemical process, the Kabbalistic, where you go through like the, whatever that central Sephir is, like, you know, the dark one.
Yeah.
But like, that's, you know, you got to go through it.
Yeah.
And the solution is exactly what you're saying, is like, you need to find it from within.
Yeah.
And what these levels are, it's like you find something within, but there's still another level where you're being supported by externally and you're not even recognizing.
Yeah.
And
or
then
you're still caught up in like whatever delusion that you didn't even know.
And we're all like as awake as we are at any given moment. And like, even when you go deeper, like you're like, oh, now I found a deeper thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like you're holding on to. So it's, and I guess you're right. It's like learning that trust and then learning the flow.
Yeah.
Like to be like, well, okay, well, if this is what's going on, like, how do I flow with it?
Or like, it's funny, like I think back to being on acid, because I think there's a lot of corollaries. And I think this is maybe part of why like a lot of shamanic traditions use, and like whatever you want to call them, psychedelics or entheogens or whatever. Because I think that process of going into this sort of space where like literally nothing is understandable or sort of even definitive, you know, everything's just sort of a mash of like chaotic sensory data and impressions, and being able to like go through that unscathed is almost sort of the same experience, but on like this micro level, like just this momentary level or whatever, you know, where you like might see something or experience something on that where you're like, wow, that's like overwhelmingly strange, but okay, moving on. Like there's nothing I can do about that or whatever. A kitty cat.
2 cats are right here, actually. And I lost the fourth one earlier. It was interesting. But now tying this back to the conference, like this is what I think is really what I think is going to be helpful, or what it could or should be about, is this recognition of like, if you're here, you're at a certain level of understanding.
Yeah.
And guess what? If you haven't realized that you're friggin' nuts, like, and you're gonna come to that place at some point, but this recognition, like, we're all kind of doing that too.
Yeah.
And like the collective support, the community support, and like all the different things which the different individuals bring, is like, we're kind of figuring this out as we go. Like, you know, we've got us here, we've got some topics we're going to talk about, but like, it's no longer theory.
Yeah. That's definitely how it feels.
It's no longer theory. Like, I mean, and even like having discussions like, what do you do when you see something like what Max went through?
Yeah.
Or like, what happened when the whole Tracy Twyman thing happened?
Yeah.
Like, when these things happen, like, as a community, because we, on a slight aside, but I think this is part of it, like, part of the collective psychological trauma which anyone who's been raised in our society, in our culture, is like this dance between you're very, very special, and like saying yourself special is like the worst thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? And both have points. And like, let's go with, and so like working with that as well, like, you know, like, this is a lot of where everyone is, if you're at a certain level, if you're still like hanging on the game, if you're coming to this type of conference, if you're in this type of world, well, you've already identified yourself as being unlike the majority.
Yeah.
And so guess what? You're special.
Yeah, true.
Everyone here's got something.
Yeah.
Pass the test because you're here. But, and like, kind of like owning that, but then at the same time, like, but don't get so full of yourself.
Yeah, don't think you're like the one.
Right.
So I think that's like super dangerous. I think a lot of people will have like a very profound spiritual experience and be like, I must be like the one, because why is this happening to me? And it's like, well, you're experiencing something that honestly a lot of people have experienced. Not most people. You know, it's still like a small, but a lot of people. And so you're like never alone in any of these experiences. And I think that's always really important to remember, because I think that is the danger when you have something like that happen. But you're absolutely right. And this is like a problem I have with myself, is I will never, you know, I had this aura reader lady, and she's like, why aren't you like claiming your power? And I'm like, you know, like, I know what she's talking about, but I'm like, no. And she's like, you kind of have to, like, you kind of have to admit that you are special and that you do have whatever skills or, you know, whatever. And I'm like, well, that's actually like the most terrifying thing. I think we talked about this last time a little too, is it's like, it's actually like harder to admit your sort of specialness and your unique ability or whatever that might be than it is to deny it. And just say like, no, this is just normal. And I don't know.
I mean, that's, I like to so the witchy girl who I was talking about.
Yeah.
So she loved all of the like the kind of like new agey spiritual memes. Like, that was so I became, that was part of like, you know, what I saw, or what was when we're around each other.
Yeah.
And I like to see them, because I would laugh at them kind of internally, but I'm like, you know, that's just, but there's truth to them.
Yeah.
But where was I going to go with this? So what did you just say?
Claiming your power is scary.
Oh yeah. So like, one of the things is like, one of the mantras in that world is like, you know, the hardest thing to do is to claim your power. And I kind of roll my eyes, but there's a truth to that. And
yeah.
What you're saying is like, claim your power is like an abstract. And I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean?
Yeah.
like take out a lightsaber, you know?
I wish.
But maybe it's just like what you're saying, which is like really being able to like find that line of saying like, yeah, this is where I'm special. This is where I have demonstrated, and where I know like this is what makes me unique.
Yeah.
And to be able to say that, because without having to go and like couch it and like not downplay, you know, I don't want to sound all full of myself. but then at the same time not being all full of yourself, like
Yes.
that I don't think is an easy thing.
No. I think it's like really easy to fall on either side of that and really hard to walk that middle path. Like, yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of like always on the lookout for that because I know I have this tendency and nobody really believes me, but it's true. I think some people see it if they're like know me long enough, but I do have a tendency to kind of be like, yeah, I'm awesome and you're a piece of shit. Like, what the fuck? like I have that in me from my past. And so it's really, I'm always kind of on the lookout of like, don't get cocky. Like, remember that you're just like a normal person like everyone else or whatever. And I have this thing where like, I think I'm like physically larger than I am. Like, I do have like an inflated ego. And so I've tried to sort of tamp that down. But it's interesting if you heard James True's ideas about ego, and that ego is actually this good thing that like you needed, and it's a part of your survival, but also a part of your like confidence and ability to say like, yeah, this is who I am and here's what I deserve, and I'm like, that is true, and we don't really honor that ever. We're kind of like, it's stuck in this cycle of like kill the ego, kill the ego, kill the ego. But there is like, it's both are true. Like, you both cannot have too big of an ego and like think that you're like better and above everyone, but you also need to like acknowledge who you actually are and be confident in that and claim that.
Yeah.
Which I'm not that good at either.
I think that's part of like when I about the cultural thing, like, we're both like given at the same time all of these like amazing individuals to look up, stars, celebrities, presidents, what have you, which like really like unconsciously says you want to be a star, you want to be famous, you want that. And then at the same time there's like a constant like, don't be full of yourself.
Yeah.
Bringing this astrologically, that's what fire is about, or that's part of like fire signs. Fire deals with identity. And so, I mean, the most obvious being Leo. Like, Leo is, we think about that, but that's the fire. Sag has it too. Like, no one knows how great they are as much as Sages and Leos, because that's a sense of identity. And that's the fire where the light is. And like, it's easier to understand it abstractly than to then actually get embodied and then like deal with that I'm sorry, like as soon as I was saying that, I was thinking about the relationship with like owning how great you are, and then also the role of feedback, which confirms how great you are. Like, because that's an element also, is like, and it goes both ways. Like, when you're not getting that feedback, like, to be able to still hold that to stand in that truth. And then the flip side, when you're getting feedback when it's not really true, that's the whole like worm tongue, sort of the guy who whispers in your ear and is like tells you all the things you want to hear, and like being surrounded by yes men, like
sycophants.
Exactly. And so it's these are I think these are attributes to be honed, and we don't talk much about that, because it's kind of like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to want to talk about your greatness in a way, like and how you navigate that. I find this very interesting, and I think there's a need for it too.
Yeah, because if anyone's ever gonna I don't even know what words I want to use. If anyone's going to ever actually do something amazing, it's going to be because they know their greatness.
Or at least that's going to be part of it. Or part of the journey is like, when you go, particularly, I don't know if I'm causing it or not, but, when you go through the point where you're tested, then there's going to be a point where you are going to have to walk through that and that challenge on your own. That's the whole like hero's journey. That's the whole alchemical sort of thing. That's what like the pharaohs were supposedly preparing for. Like, any of these rituals where people would go and prepare, or I guess like that's like the Book of the Dead in Tibetan sort of stuff, is like preparing for this one thing which you're going to do yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, that may be on the spiritual plane, but maybe more on the psychological and real world plane. It's like we need to have an understanding of what that looks like, so that when we're faced with it, we know that this is it.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know exactly what it's going to be, but you're going to be challenged. You're going to feel that you're not good enough, and you're going to have to at some point navigate through, and it's going to be unique for each person.
Yeah.
And then, you know, all this ties in all the psychological stuff, and then this time as well. Or at least these are the things which I'm interested in, and these are the things which I'm working with on a personal level.
Yeah. Yeah, it all ties in with things that I'm totally working on too. It's interesting because the idea of sort of facing that in death is like this plane is often looked at in many traditions as just like preparation for whatever comes next. And you like basically keep coming back until you're like done being prepared for whatever comes next. And that was part of the message of that Castaneda passage too, was that and it's also part of the message that Max said in his first video, which is the one where he's, you know, allegedly not quite right or whatever, is this message that, you know, there is something that comes. And at that point, it's like there's, like, he says, like, there is one person, whatever. At some point, you're going to be the person facing this thing that you have to get past. And, you know, that this is not like this evil sort of trap, but it's more like this process for becoming whatever, you know.
Now, now we're talking very Luciferian concept.
Yes, well, that's I always come back to this
Satan,
Luciferian
the adversary,
thing.
like, you know,
Right.
Saturn. It's all the same. This is here. He's not your enemy. It's karma. You're going to reap what you sow, but this is what you got to face.
Right.
But to
And
bring
these
it
are
back,
the sort of like rules and parameters you need to deal with if you're going to do it.
there are two things that I want to say to that. One, an idea which has always struck me is interesting is we see, like, for example, like the Tibetan Buddhists, and there was that movie that came out, I think it was called like Midsommar, like Midsomer.
I've not heard of
It came
that.
out, I think, this spring, but it's an interesting movie. If you haven't seen it, I think you would find it interesting. But
It's like half asleep or something, Midsommar.
It's kind of like people find themselves, modern contemporary people find themselves in this like pagan culture, and everyone kills themselves at age 72, and it's like wonderful festivals and beauty, but the message is there's all this like dark and death with it, and like human sacrifice and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But looking at those two types of cultures, which are always like immortalizing death, you know, it will be a great day when I die. The samurais are like that. We see that like in a lot of like, you know, these warrior cultures, like it will be a great day when I die, and I want to have an honorable death. And I live my life waiting for the day I get to die. So what happens, this is what I think is interesting, because there's certain things when you look at that with an open mind, you're like, there's something really friggin' empowering about that.
Yeah.
And when you look at our culture is everything, which is, how do I live as long as I can? How can I how can I be as healthy as I can? How can I live?
Never even look at death or think about it or talk about it?
And so what if we're living in an inversion world? And so what if the truth in how culture works is, when you live in a culture focused on death, you actually live. And when you live in a culture focused on life, you're actually dead.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
But we're in a dead culture. Like,
Yeah.
there's no life. There's there's like, it's not about creativity. It's not about like, you know, expression. It's not about like living.
Yeah.
It's about this other stuff, because we're all so afraid of death. And then these other cultures, and I don't know, I've never lived in one. If there's so much about death, maybe they really fucking live.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that, like there was some point in my life where I was like, so overwhelmed by how just fucking crazy my life, like it was terrifyingly and horrible. and I couldn't deal with it very well. And so I finally just like came to a spot where I'm like, dude, I'm gonna die someday and I'm not dead yet. So like that's it. That's all I need to know. And I'm moving past all this bullshit. And I like was losing my relationship and my house, and somebody was trying to kill me, and it was a really, my car was getting stolen all the time. Like it was a crazy, crazy time. And that was finally what got me through it, was embracing like, well, I'm gonna die. Like we know that for sure. And it's not here yet. And so like, what am I gonna do in the meantime? And it's weirdly like was the way that I kept my sanity through all that, was just accepting that like, death was coming. So it's like the closer I got to death, and then that became my sort of mantra, is like, I'm not dead yet. I'm not dead yet. So why am I in this job that I hate? Like, why am I living my life like this? And I'm not dead yet. So why aren't I like traveling around in a van, which is what I've been wanting to do for years, and like see the country? And, it kind of transformed me. So I think there's a lot to that. Not that you should be obsessed with death or like, wanting it to come to you necessarily or whatever, but just being aware of that it's going to happen for sure. It's the one thing you can be sure of, and living your life as such.
I would take it a step further. And I think that I like to adopt that idea of like embracing death, and wanting it, not like how I said in that culture. It's like, may I have an honorable death, whatever honorable may be.
Yeah.
But like there's a freedom. Maybe that's what happens. Maybe that's why you get to live, because there's a freedom that happens, that you're not afraid to die.
Yeah,
And
I think
in fact,
that's it.
you're looking forward to it. Like, when I die, I get to return home and go to Valhalla. When I, whatever whatever the story is. But then this is where belief comes. It's like, you can't just do it as a trick to your brain.
No.
You really got to believe it.
Yeah. No, you really do. I had this really profound experience once where I was basically, felt in my experience, I was being embraced by God, whatever that is. It was this nebulous light cloud of like infinite love, and it's like literally the best feeling I've ever had, ever. And leaving that feeling was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And realizing that most likely the only time you get to have that feeling is when you're dead. I was like, dude, maybe death is like the best thing that ever happens to you. Maybe this is like almost like the hell, or like, it's at least the crucible.
Yeah, I love how you put that. I think and this was kind of, it's funny we're having this Max conversation, because the Max thing has been kind of like in the back of my mind, because you posed me this question. You're like, well, Max wants to know what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
And that kind of like stopped me in my tracks. I was like, what do I want to talk about? Like it was a feeling, but how do I express that in words?
Yeah.
And that's been mulling around kind of in the back of my mind for a week or 2 weeks, however long that's been. And today I actually, I wrote down what I want to say, like right
How
before.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's interesting about the timing. But what I wanted to talk to him about, and it had to do with Tartaria, or at least that was the lead-in.
Yeah.
But it was this idea of really like having a discussion. Like, I know of like a discussion I want to have, but I don't know where it goes. I certainly don't have answers, but rethinking all of these assumptions that we have about life on Earth, and then taking the approach that if this is inversion culture, what would it look like if we invert that?
Yeah.
Which is what we were just talking about, which is things like, what if this is the hell?
Yeah.
What if this is like, what if we should be wanting death?
Yeah.
I don't think you can kill yourself.
No.
Like, I think like that's the trick. Like you can't kill yourself.
Totally.
But there's this other, like, and everything is in question. Like big ideas, but then also small things. I mean, I say this, I've brought this up a lot, as it relates to vision. Like particularly people with glasses. I'm like, what if the way which you actually see is like, that is your gift? like the way which you perceive. And the only reason why you need glasses is because it is convenient for how our culture is structured. You need to read small things. Like I get that. And like it's helpful for driving or what have you.
Yeah.
But those are assumptions based upon a culture about reading small things and
driving. Yeah.
and driving. So like if
Pretty
those
specific
were not in play,
tasks.
that is not important. And the significance of that is with the eyes, going physiologically, like the eyes control the brain.
Weird.
The part of the brain, and this is why I say that. The human body and everything in the natural world is built upon a underlying strategy of economics, meaning the most bang for the buck. I want to get the most amount of work with the least amount of effort. Like everything is convenient. Like that's why water flows in the path of least resistance.
Right.
And so when you see something which does not seem to be the most convenient, it's because there's another piece of information in play. And so the question becomes like, well, what's causing it? So that being said, the part of the brain that processes vision is located on the back of the brain. What would make the most amount of sense and how the rest of the body is kind of structured is like the stuff that needs to work together is as close as possible. Yeah. So it would make sense that, oh, if I'm just processing vision, it would be right behind the eye.
Right.
Unless there's a reason why. And so we have these optical nerves that go through the entire brain. And what they're doing is they're taking light frequency, and that frequency goes through the entire physical structure of the brain, whatever the brain is. We know it's something. Like, I mean, I think there's a whole lot more, but like the brain is the mechanism. And so the entire mechanism is being affected by what you see. And so when you wear glasses, you know, what it's doing is it's giving you uniform vision. So everyone sees the same thing the same way in the most literal sense.
Yeah.
It's convenient. It's convenient as fuck for our society.
Yeah.
That's changing the way you are if you don't have 20/20 vision. And likewise, as you get old, as your vision deteriorates, maybe that's something too. And so going back to where I'm going with this is like, this is the type of discussion, like, you know, if what are we assuming about our culture, which is like affecting us in ways we may not even know. I was listening to, I was sitting down with Jenny last night. We're looking at, what's the dude's name? Neil Bromston or whatever. The dude who talks all about simulation theory. He's like a Cambridge philosopher, and he's kind of like on par with like a Ray Kurzweil. You know, Ray Kurzweil?
Yeah.
Singularity. So he's kind of like, he's like a state-sponsored intelligentsia who's telling us what's coming.
Right.
And so this is the guy who mainstreamed simulation theory.
This isn't the guy with the curly long hair.
No,
okay.
This guy's got like glasses, and he's got like, he looks kind of egg shaped, like, you know, he's got a bald head, like he looks like a straight out of central casting for the Egghead. I'm not pronouncing his name right. It's Neil. If you were to search Neil B. Simulation Theory, it's
you
that
get it.
dude.
Okay.
I'm certain you've seen him.
I'm sure I have too.
So we're watching this talk which he's having. He's being interviewed by like some council, and his entire, like, he goes back to this assumption when he's explaining his simulation theory, and the assumption is like somewhere like, you know, there's a more advanced civilization and their computers are more advanced and they need electricity for the computers and it's got to plug in and all this sort of stuff. But it's completely based upon this assumption that like the more advanced the society would be, like they would have more like computers, like hardware computers. And if I were the sort of person, like the open-minded person who watches TED Talks.
Yeah. And
this is like, if you look at the mainstream thinker and then look at the mainstream thinker who watches TED Talks, he thinks that, or she thinks that they're on the cutting edge of free thought for society.
Right.
But it's still couched in all of these assumptions, like what we saw Neil was doing. I think that's true for all of us. Like, it's easy to point out someone else's blind spot.
True.
And so that's why, like, I bring up the glasses. It's like, and depth. It's like, I think that what would be an interesting conversation, and maybe you and I have a conversation like this, is and maybe a panel sort of thing, is like beginning to like deconstruct assumptions
Yeah.
about how we live, in a way to kind of like, not necessarily to adopt a new program. I'm not saying stop wearing your glasses,
Yeah.
but it's we need to shake off some stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why Tartaria, I think, is so important, is because Tartaria, or at least I have in my mind a narrative of Tartaria, which is a model of like what high civilization could look like.
Right.
You know, where we're not living in the Stone Age,
Yes.
but we're not using computers.
Right.
And still got cool ass architecture, but it's all the things you and I talk about this almost every
Yes.
single time. Like, I want to like make it more and more grounded. I want to make it less abstract and like play with the abstract, but then also bring it back to the groundedness of like glasses. And do you wear glasses?
No, I actually just got a pair of readers because I realized that I think it's nearsightedness or whatever. Like if something's really close, I can't. It's all blurry, but I don't know how long I've had that because I just hold my books at the distance I need to read them. So like it doesn't really matter, but I got them in case it helps. But I find that wearing them is so annoying that I'd rather like hold my book further away than wear them. So I don't know the point of them really.
Do you, what's cool, and this is like a real thing, which I think the eyes are really, really important. I think ears are really, all the senses, all of our lower senses have higher attributes, and they're much more significant than I think we give credit for. But with the 3D magic eye posters, or when you stare at them, you're literally you're seeing in a certain way, and you're getting feedback mechanism. There's one thing for me to describe like how to go and like soften your focus. Can you see a 3D? Are you able to see the images in 3D magic?
Yeah. In fact, if I'm trying to tell someone how to see auras, that's what I use. Is I'm like, it's just the same way that you would see one of those images. You kind of like relax your vision a bit.
And you see through it. Same thing which you do in martial arts. Same thing which you do in all of like the Eastern esoteric arts. It's the same thing.
I didn't know that.
What's cool about the Magic 3D is there's real feedback.
Yeah.
Like, how do I know if I'm doing it right? Oh, I see the picture.
Yeah.
You know, if we're just describing it and you're like, I think I'm doing it right, but it's hard to describe it.
Right.
It's when you see it, your brain, like everything changes.
Yeah.
You go, the brain waves harmonize as well. And like, that's how I kind of like, I had that aha moment with like the back of the brain and the optical nerves from like reading about the 3D eye from an optometrist and what it does. Or whatever. And applying it like a little bit higher level.
Wow.
I think those are interesting. Like all of this is like this ties into like what we're talking about before. Like these are the sort of skills and questions I think we need to like be like maybe communally discussing.
Yeah.
Particularly as we have to do something, and this is where belief comes in. Max says a reset's coming. Realistically, from what we're told, the technology which is out there, and the controllers that have it, like without a reset, without something greater than just oneself, it's pretty dismal. So that's why I'm like, there has to be a reset. If there's not, or like whatever that reset, there has to be something else. But how do we get there? And that, I don't know that answer, but I believe that's the only thing that can make sense. And I want to have a real discussion with people and like about topics like this without like gurus. Like we're all gurus. Like each person knows some stuff, and like because this is the only thing, the only way we're going to kind of work through this sort of thing, and like part of it has to do with like money.
Yes.
You know, and computers and all this sort of stuff. I mean, my belief in the Tartarian Empire is that the humans' experience is ultimately travel throughout Earth.
Yeah.
And meeting other people and having adventures.
Yeah.
Like literally that's what it is. And that's why these amazing structures and hamlets are throughout Earth. And I think they're portals. I think they're real fucking portals.
Yeah.
And you really teleport. I don't know how to find it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I haven't done it yet. But that's the only thing that makes sense to me.
You are going to really enjoy the episode that's coming up about crystals on the 30th of this month, because Sasha McDonald specifically is coming on, and Ben and Balderson, and then I think Chris D. Jones is going to join us, and perhaps Chris Ann. And anyway, Ben has this immense technical knowledge of crystals of all different types. But Sasha has sort of unlocked this thing, and she's been on the Tartaria trip for a while. So she's very deeply kind of steeped in all of that. And then the way she's connecting it with crystals and crystal technology is like pretty mind blowing. But I don't want to drop her game.
Exactly, without a doubt. I think everything which we do with computers, we could do with a crystal.
Yes. Well, and people are like, well, prove it, or like, how do you know? And it's like, I just like feel it. I can't prove it yet. I feel like it's true. I feel like it's been obvious for a long time. If you look to the sort of spiritual practitioners around the world, especially in places such as like India and Buddhists and Hindus, crazy shit happens. Shit that like physics and scientists can't explain. Yeah. And if humans are capable of that, and that's in this space where we're so sort of like suppressed and detached from that, then imagine like if all of us were on that same, you know, wavelength or whatever you want to call that. Like,
so I'm so friggin' excited right now. So that this is, in my opinion, this is what the solution looks like.
Yes.
You're the person who says, well, prove it, is 100% right.
Yeah.
But we have to cross a bridge.
Yeah.
And crossing that bridge is becoming emotional. Like, I know that what makes sense? How can we deconstruct? Because it can't be like what we're experiencing now. And we know if that's an inversion, what would the right side up look, and where are we going to look? Of course it's crystals. Yeah. We know that. Look at the friggin' crystalline matrix of the molecules. Like, we know there's something special. It's the only thing that, like, until we find what makes it true is the fact that crystals are universally found throughout the earth.
Yeah.
It has to be a way that we can live in body without having to like...
Yeah, do all this shit. Be so, like, mired down in the sort of physical and the...
Here's the other thing. So another thought is, it is the cooperative competition continuum. And so we as humans, as like we live in groups, you know, we're social beings.
Yeah.
And we have a dance with cooperation and competition. And that's part of like the what makes being human fun.
Yeah. It's kind of the same dynamic as the, you know, between like a lack of ego and a healthy amount of ego or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe like the vertical act continuum and the horizontal.
Yeah.
Because there's a play to it that's fascinating. I want to graph that and think about that. So how I see it right now is we live in a culture which is 80% competition and 20% cooperation.
Yeah.
And I think that in Tartaria, and when I say Tartaria, I use it as a concept.
Yes.
It was the other way. It was 80% cooperation and 20% competition. Competition's fun. We like games. It makes us better. Like, it's like courtship,
yes.
All of that sort of stuff. But like fighting for parking spots, fighting for jobs, fighting for like, we do the cooperation of the work that does need to happen. Like, we want to work. Humans want to work.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of how, like, you get your itch scratched that way.
Yeah.
If you have, so it's that's why crystals also make so much sense, because they're everywhere. Quartz crystals, there are over 16,000 known locations on the earth where quartz crystals naturally occurs. You can find them everywhere. And I think
And we
cannabis
use
is
them for all of our timekeeping and all of our computing.
right.
Like,
It's like
it's
what
like there's a reason like that inversion or whatever is like taken the real. I don't want to say magic because it's not magic, it's real, but it's taken that sort of magic and like fucked it up into this, computers and screens and
yes, yes,
which is
yes.
diminishing them, and it's like not even playing on the true potential, and I don't know.
The word magic is a catch in my this is how I define it, particularly culturally used. Magic is a catch-all word. Everything which we can think of that magic for all of its connotations would fall under. It's a catch-all word for the way which we lived in Tartaria.
Yeah.
Like, and we didn't think about it. We didn't have a name for it. Like we don't like think about like all of the stuff we're doing right now, like the breathing and like the all of that sort of, we just did it. Like we understood it. And part of magic is we don't know why it works. We just know how it works.
Yeah.
That's part of the mystery. There is a mystery. There is a mystery, but that's part of it. So the magic plays into it. I think we have the pieces of the puzzle. Like we know crystals play into it.
Yeah.
We know there's all this sort of stuff. I think we want to travel. I think they're homesteaders, people who keep the places. I mean, this is what I think. I think that the portals with the crystals, we go to a place when the moon does certain things, portals open, and we go for a certain period of time, and we can make arrangements with other people beforehand. There's a place for us to stay. There's a place for us to do stuff.
Yeah.
And we go and we have adventures, and we meet people, and we have human dramas, and we go back home, and we have all of this stuff, which is awesome about being human.
Yeah.
And we're not worried about, like, where am I going to stay? What am I going to pay? We don't need to eat. We love to cook because we love food. We have regional crystals and regional food and regional dances. And we have this thing. And and we need to discover it. And here's the other thing. I think that part of the rivers have to do with the portals.
That's what Derek Murphy says.
That's a mystery. That's like,
Yeah.
part of what, like, it ties into all of that.
You got chills. I just want to say, and I'm not trying to self-promote necessarily, but this book came out of my desire to read about a, time like Tartaria.
Is that a story?
Yeah.
Can you mail me a copy?
Yeah, I would love to.
Mail me a copy.
I will. And then this was before I'd ever heard of Tartaria, but I was just like, but there has to have been a time where we were just like comfortable and at peace with ourselves, and we had access to everything we needed without all this competition. And this is the book that came out of that sort of desire. So
you're tapped into something. I think that what you were you felt it and it came out. And
okay. Not only that, but I just told the story on the Green Man episode too, but I'll just briefly say it again. It's basically this started then being like channeled to me, and I don't like the word channeled because it's not like I literally there's no like automatic writing, and I didn't like get word for word or whatever, but I would sit down. I had no idea how to write a novel. I had always thought that people who wrote novels must be crazy, like intelligent or whatever. And I sat down to just like, well, I have this idea and I want to, so I'm just going to start and see what happens. And literally like just images and scenes and characters would just pop into my head, and I would just start describing them. And I didn't even know at all what was going to happen next. Every time I sat down to write, it just things would happen. And so that's how this book came about. And there's other crazy synchronicities and stuff that sort of blows my mind about this book, but it definitely came from somewhere to me, and I just like birthed it into this reality, and there it is.
I'm going to suggest that is what I'm calling Tartaria.
It basically is Tartaria. It's just I didn't call it that because I didn't have that word, but it's basically that. That
is why I think it's so important, and this is why I want to have the conversation, is because we need to have a collective understanding of what, whatever word we use to describe it. Like there was a way which we lived.
Yeah.
And we sense it.
Yeah.
You sense it so strongly. You were so connected with it that you were able, like the images came to you. You wrote, like it wrote itself.
Yeah, it literally wrote itself.
Like, that's just the way we lived. Like we're coming up with words to kind of describe this strange sort of thing. When you lived in Tartaria, you understood that's how it works.
Yeah.
Like there was no description. It's not like, how did you dream last night? Like, what did you do to prepare to dream? Like, I don't know, I went to friggin' sleep.
Yeah.
but like, it was like that that it was that integrated with understanding of what life is.
Yeah.
And as we can begin, when I'm saying we, I'm talking like now and contemporary real body, as we can come up with like this story and we talk about it, like we don't know it's real, but we know it's real, and we need to right side up the inversion.
Yeah.
And it's almost kind of like the rallying cry. We kind of know what we're looking for. We don't know where, but we're looking for it.
Yes.
And it's like, I can't explain it, but like that, I don't know where that will bring us, but that brings us closer to whatever the next step to be, to this like real sort of, like, yeah, you go in the backyard and there really is a portal. It's not like weird shit, and it's not abstract. Like,
you don't have to do a blood sacrifice to get it.
Right. And I'm not doing this with my astral body and I project it, and I'm like, not that I'm saying that's not nothing. I'm saying like, I want to do it with my friggin' physical body.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, that's the proof is in the pudding.
I think it's just like like some of the things that happen with writing this book, or like your 16 stones synchronicity or whatever, like the fact that Lori posted this like thing that Max Igan had just read and that it like ties all together. I think there's a reason why, you know, Derek Murphy is so into portals and found all of that and put all that together, and they all have to do with rivers. And I think there's a reason that you have been studying Susquehanna your whole, you know, for all this time. And there's a reason why this group came together, and there's a reason why we're having this event on the solstice in that location, and that all of these things tie together. And it's like you were saying earlier, like we all are bringing something to it. There's no like guru or special person. We're all like the gurus in this together. Like literally, it's not just some like thing we're saying to, you know, everybody gets a participation trophy or whatever. It's like there really is something special about each person who is going to be there. Yeah,
it's like almost the Knights of the Round Table.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's this like, all right, we're finding what was, where did they live? Avalon, was that where they lived?
Yeah.
Like Avalon sounds just like Tartaria, you know. It's got like that. It's it's not, and the thing is, what I think is important, like we're not talking like utopia.
No. There's still bad guys and troubles in this book.
yeah, exactly. There's still like human drama.
Yeah.
But it's like it's not this system.
Yes.
And it's not living like this.
One-on-one lesson, so do your homework. Make your dome hurt while up on earth. My bones are blessed from holy dirt. Vibes manifested to words that told me search for verbs and adjectives to describe birth. Worth more than one can speak, while the tongue feeds a weak, a sour taste in your mouth, bittersweet. Words can also kill you when you sleep. Mind condition, low frequencies while the subconscious mind listens. I can tell a vision filled with lies, disguised as truth, and spread it like the word to the youth. Watch the tube. A place where the God is food is sorcery. To recreate the God forgery does more than meets the eye. Not too many know. Just hear me flow like the eye of Horus Pinio. Yeah, not ready to leave until we believe we're free to go. You hear me? Go.
Sculpted from the ether, the material will eat ya. Stuck on this plane, lanes use jet fuel to greet ya. The dimensional three ain't beating me on top of the fourth. Didn't climb Jacob's ladder to squab with a sword. Forge with Yggdrasil, branch down, try quiet your lamps now. Ascension past the matter that they slam out they damn mouths. We ain't on land now, but they over understand. Sacrificing wisdom, hoarding dumber kosher wicked hands. Putting faith in worthless worship of the mortals. Artificial portals, mass ingestion product of the black goo, bioengineered morsels. Conversing with machine elves, bypassing maggots. They stuck on Android screens now. I'm scrolling emerald tablets. Moloch living lavish, off the backs of the savage. Them clasped hands at the Sabbath, smack of energy damage. They done twisted the tongues with nanotech in the lungs. The awakening's begun. All they really can do is fucking
run.